not just parents, but coaches and teachers and people who are stakeholders working with children. They want what's best, but they kill the dream.
Well, I see a lot of the dads, they're trying to get the kid to live the dream they had. That overly invested dad on the sideline.
You got to know your kid, a deeper level of knowing your kid, creating that space for them to speak freely.
About how we're seeing more and more young athletes get repetitive stress injuries earlier and earlier because of how hard they're hitting a singular sport early. When sports end for a boy whose life was defined by his athletics, what's left of his identity? And how do we help young boys and young men transition from athletics into the rest of their life? What does it teach us about resilience? If you're curious about the answer to those questions, you're in the right place. My name's Tim Winnicky. This is American Masculinity. In our 18th episode, we're here with Jamal Jackson. Jamal's a former student of mine who I'm so proud of the colleague he's become. He works as a school social worker and has a small practice helping young student athletes reach their potential and come through the other side of athletics healthy and well. He is a former D2 athlete and a clinician. We don't get many guys with that background in this field, so we're so lucky to have him and so lucky that he was willing to come on and share his insights. I'm really proud of what he's done with his work. While you listen to the episode, think about what you would have liked to have known when you were in athletics, what you wish somebody might have told you when you transitioned out of athletics. Most little boys have that moment where they think they're going to go pro, where they love the game so much that they can just imagine doing it the rest of their life. And so few of us get to make that transition. So think about that moment for yourself. We'll talk about it more at the end. Let's get started. Hey, Jamal, man, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for having me. I'm
Yeah.
excited. I've been thinking about this for the last couple of weeks, so I look forward to it.
Yeah, man, I was excited to reconnect. Like we were talking about when we met back up.
Yeah, for sure. I love talking about sports and social work and the impact on people because oftentimes we glorify athletics and it's like our athletes are warriors in the movie 300, but in all actuality they're human just like the rest of us.
One, I think there is beauty in professional sports for the guys that are there, but I don't understand why so many guys treat their kids like they're going to be there. And they're not, right? Most kids just need room to play.
Yeah, for sure. Again, I think it's that glorification of what it means to be an athlete. It's that, Sunday night I'm on television and everyone around the world can see me playing. I'm making all of this money. It's the idea of success.
Mm.
It's the idea that I've made it and that there are no problems. I've got money. I've got a career that I'm successful in, making so much money that I don't have to, my kids don't have to worry. My kids' don't have to worry. We've got generational wealth. And so when you have that, other aspects of life, I feel like they're just backburnered.
Well, I think that's just an American perspective, right? If we've got money, we've got less problems. But that's very clearly not the case. Like, how many NFL players go bankrupt within 5 years of finishing their season?
For sure, for sure. A majority of them do. And,
Yeah.
I think that goes back to the foundation of the glorification of athletics. When you do have those elite athletes, what happens to them when they're transitioning from youth to high school, to college, to the pros? People want to talk to them about that sport. The investment when they get to that college level is about that sport. It's not necessarily about the education that they're supposed to obtain. It's about what can I do to make sure that my team is successful and we're able to win a national championship, go on to the next level, become a professional athlete.
Yeah, and then most of them don't. I've only worked with a few professional athletes, but I've worked with a lot of former college athletes. And it's always kind of sad to watch what happens with those guys afterwards. Because all of a sudden, once they stop playing, no one's got patience for their interpersonal skills not being what they should. Like all of a sudden, their girl's mad at them and she didn't used to be.
Yeah, for sure. That's an experience that I think there's a lot of guys out there that can relate to because once that athletic journey is over, many of those guys they have to hit the reset button.
Mm-hmm.
And many of them struggle to figure out how do I hit the reset button? Because this is what I've been my whole life. Like what am I without football? And so I like to think of that as the cognitive distortion, that
Yeah.
all or nothing thinking, Like, well, if I
Mm-hmm.
don't have football, if I don't have basketball, if I don't have baseball, I don't have anything. Oftentimes you have these athletes and their focus is the X's and the O's.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't someone there to help them understand how their athletic experience, what they've gone through, there are transferable skills within that experience that you can apply to other aspects of life. And so again, when you're doing that all or nothing thinking, you can't see that other side. You can't see
Mm-hmm.
that if you were engaged in team sports, like you can go into the working world and navigate that.
Yeah.
Whether you did well with your interpersonal skills with those teammates or you didn't, you know what you need to do if you didn't do it right, and
Mm-hmm.
you have that skill set. It's there.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of being able to. Sometimes I think a lot of athletes need help unlocking that key so that they can see the other
Yeah.
side.
Yeah. Well, it's always really powerful too, because once those guys kind of, if they're working with me, it's usually like a 6 month to 2 year grind to figure out what they're going to go do. But then once they have it, the mission orientation, right, of getting stuff done, the like team dynamic of like, this is the goal, we're going to go get the goal, and being that kind of motivated person, which I think athletics is beautiful for teaching, right, is we're all moving towards the same goal, we're all competing in the same lane, let's go. They get traction almost immediately. And so I think the main problem that I see with the athletics coming into the real world is that people think it's about how they throw the ball or kick the ball, when that's not what you're taking into the world. What you're taking into the world is the teamwork, the dedication, the ability to do the work, the ability to be a teammate. And that's hard to translate if they don't have a direct skill to tie it to yet.
For sure. And I think, just hearing you talk about this, you're getting it on the back end. You're getting those
Mm-hmm.
clients on the back end, and I'm getting the clients on the front end. And so the front end, it definitely tells that story of that psychodynamic approach
Mm-hmm.
of when you think about your athletes on the back end and what's happening in the beginning. Those kids that I work with, I'm going to the NFL. Okay, all right. Well, what's your plan? Well, I'm going to go to a big time Division I college, and I'm going to play there, and then I'm going to the NFL. And then the backstory as a school social worker, because I also do that, is I specialize in working with kids who are on IEPs. And
Mm-hmm.
so oftentimes they have some social emotional challenges, academic challenges. And so in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, you want to be a professional athlete, this is going to be an uphill battle for you. Like, are you prepared for that? However, that's not necessarily a conversation that you can have with a 10, 9, 10, 11, 12, even 15, 16-year old. They're not necessarily ready for that conversation. And so it's more like you're walking with them and hoping to plant some seeds of understanding of, okay, well, if you want to be a professional athlete, you got to make sure your reading is up to par. You got to make sure your writing is up to par. You got to make sure that you know what it's going to take in order to get to that next level. And that's where the gap tends to be. And I see that gap whether it's me as a school social worker or me as a licensed clinical social worker working with student athletes. There's this plan, the end game is there, but the steps that it takes to get there, that's what's missing. And I think
Yeah.
there was one of the questions that you had asked about what can parents do? What does
Mm-hmm.
that support system look like? I think there are times when parents they want best for their children, not just parents, but coaches and teachers and
Mm-hmm.
people who are stakeholders working with children. They want what's best, but they kill the dream. And it's
Mm-hmm.
automatically, oh, you're not going to make it. Most people who are playing sports, they don't make it. And it's like, true, but are we shutting the door on an opportunity for them? Or is that a nugget or a carrot for them to then engage in the other aspects of life, such as being a good student, being a good human being, doing community service? Are we closing the door on this thing that they're passionate about that's not allowing us to be able to provide other meaningful opportunities for them so that they can succeed? So that you're not seeing them on the back end and they're like, well, I don't know what I am.
Well, I see a lot of the dads going the other way with it, where rather than like just kind of negging the kid out the whole time, which I see a good bit of too, It's they're trying to get the kid to live the dream they had. That overly invested dad on the sideline where they're screaming and yelling, the kid's got to perform, their kid's going to be a pro because they didn't get to be a pro. How often are you seeing that these days?
I mean, it exists. I honestly have not had that experience
Nice.
in the clinical setting, and I'm sure it exists. And I do have students in my school setting that have gone through that, but that the athletics piece isn't as big of a focus
Mm-hmm.
because it's school-based mental health. But I have seen it in other experiences such as ref and soccer, and how parents, specifically dads, get on their kids, and I'm kind of well, when I was ref, and this was a few years back, a no nonsense type of referee where it's like I'm put your dad in check
Mm-hmm.
because you need to play the game and you need to be focused on the game and not worried about dad cussing you out because you made a mistake. I know it's there. I know it's prevalent. I think it's hard because there's a balance, and we're human, and we want the best for the youth, our children. And so I have that understanding. I can be empathetic about that. It's difficult to really pinpoint like a reason, the reasons why dads feel the need to go there. Maybe it is a I'm living vicariously through my child. Maybe it is the passion is so there and they see their kids so differently. I can relate to that as a father. Just seeing my son born, like that sense of pride was higher than any goal that I ever scored, any touchdown that I ever caught,
Mm-hmm.
any tackle that I ever made. I had 23 tackles in one game, set the record. That was the sense of pride for that was
Mm-hmm.
minimal compared to my son being born, my
Mm-hmm.
son taking his first steps, my son running, my son laughing. That I get it. I think when you combine that with you see your kid struggling or you see your kid not performing in the way that you feel or you've seen them do in the past, I think dads can get really emotional about it. And that's where you see that push and sometimes going overboard in supporting their sons in sports. And what I do know that comes from that, and I have worked with a few different clients, is the burnout.
Mm-hmm.
The burnout of underperforming or not being able to perform because of that pressure. The burnout of I've been playing since I was 6 years old. I'm 16 now, and I'm riding the bench, and I'm not getting in the game. And my dad is pissed off at the coach. I'm annoyed with the coach too. I should be playing. And so oftentimes I feel like the clients that I've worked with are relieved to get away, especially those
No.
those clients who aren't in their junior and senior year. They sophomore year, that was kind of it. And then it
Mm-hmm.
was it was time to move on and find themselves outside of athletics.
Well, and I imagine I've been pretty good about helping the dads I work with calm down and figure out that line between teaching, critique, and pride. A father's pride is a powerful thing. Your kids need to see that you have that for them. Being a teacher is a powerful moment for any parent, but particularly dads, like most of the dads that I work with, they're more excited about a 4-year-old than they are a baby because they know they can teach the 4-year-old something,
Yep.
right?
Okay.
And then there's that kind of protective instinct of trying to get your kid, particularly your son, ready for a world that's going to be kind of rough on them.
I think part of it is you got to know your kid. And granted, most people do know their kids. But what I'm talking about is a deeper level of knowing your kid, creating that space for them to speak freely.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's got to be there. I'm talking about you're turning the TV off, no electronics. You guys are just there, father
Mm-hmm.
and son, mother, father and son, and then the whole family or whatever that may look like. You've got to hold that space, and it starts in the beginning. I definitely am going through my own experience with my own son and my wife, and us trying to figure out, well, what does this look like? And I say that to give you the example. My son came home and he said, my teacher was mad at me. Okay, well, tell us what happened. He's 3 years old, so in a 3 year old way, he was able to share like that. He was not being kind and he was taking toys away from someone else. So the teacher made him go sit out, and it's like, okay, bud, I'm glad you told me that. I'm so glad you told me that because now I can help you. I can coach you through what we need to do. I can reach out to the teacher and communicate that, hey, I heard he had an issue. I'd like to talk with you about it so that we can work through that situation together, which is a lot better situation than as a parent finding out, when you drop off, hey, your son was doing this. Like, so being able to hold that space allows kids the opportunity to be able to share with you, to
Mm-hmm.
not fear having that conversation, to not fear that they're going to be judged by the mistakes or the things that they did wrong. Because just like reading, just like math, just like social studies, it's routine. When you go to school, you do it over and over and over again. And with our
Mm-hmm.
children, we got to do the same thing with their social and emotional and their mental
Mm-hmm.
state. We have to do it over and over and over again because they're going to make mistakes. And so holding that space, having that time, and giving them that space that they know that you're not going to be judged. I need you to talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
I need you to share with me.
Yeah, that parental, like I'm a big believer that the only place that unconditional love it really often exists is from a parent to a child, and not even the other direction, right? Like that is the whatever you do, whoever you become, you're my kid and I love you.
Hmm.
And I think that as long as that remains visible to the kid, it's a lot easier for the father to have boundaries. It's a lot easier for the father to have consequences. It's a lot easier for the father to teach them. Like there's a great part in the boy crisis discussing mothers and fathers engaging with a kid that got in some trouble, where like he went somewhere he wasn't supposed to be. There were some dangerous people around. Things escalated and he got away before things got really, really bad. But it was bad enough that the mother was just freaked out and like talking about how he'll be safe by never ever doing anything like that again. And the dad was like, well, what are the things you saw along the way? Like, okay, you decided to go there. Not the greatest choice. What's the first thing you noticed that this wasn't okay? What's the second thing? What's the third thing? And basically helping him build those exit ramps. I think that's one of the things for me anyway that athletics did as a kid. It gave you a space to see consequence. It gave you a place to see success. And it gave you places to win and lose, which I think everybody in life, to be a whole person, you've got to win and you've got to lose and you got to know what both of those things feel like. Well, that kind of takes me into like a question about how athletics have changed since you and I were kids. Like I'm in my 40s. You're about the same, right?
Now I'm 40, 41.
Oh man, you just newly budded 40s. So when we were kids, at least where I grew up, everyone played some sports.
Hmm.
Like you had to. This wasn't an option. Like if you were a kid, even if you weren't that athletic kid, you had to go try a team sport and you had to go try an individual sport.
Hmm.
Even if you hated it, they made you do it.
Hmm.
And now that seems to be happening less, where they're not making kids who aren't inclined to be athletic to go try the sports. Am I reading that correctly? Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think we're in that age of electronics. Even my son, even though the screen time, he doesn't get a ton of screen time, but to see him navigate that tablet is something that I know our generation we weren't doing. And I believe Game Boys came out probably about fifth, sixth grade. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, but it's like, that wasn't around when we were 2 years old. And
No.
so, I think with technology, that was a game changer. I don't know. I think it's very different in Colorado. We're not a sports state, and by that I mean, and I think when we talked the first time, we
Yeah,
kind
you
of went
compared it
into
to
this.
Texas.
Yeah, Texas, California, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Alabama, North Carolina, South Carolina. When you think about schools like that, sports are they're in their educational system. They're
Hmm.
ingrained, and you don't see that in Colorado. As well as you don't see a ton of universities with college athletes all over the place. We don't have a lot of colleges here like they do back east and down south in California. And so
So the funnels just aren't there.
they're not there. So I feel like our kids, the current youth today, their ability to see what it takes to get to that level of competition, the sense of pride that places back east and down south have with athletics, we don't have that here. And so I will say that, even down south, there probably is a drop off in the amount of athletes that are participating compared to, the 90s, the 80s, the
Hmm.
70s. So I'm sure they're still seeing it. But when you have this well-oiled machine and you see these success stories, and for the most part, I feel like in some of those other states, not just the sports, but the academic side of things is ingrained in those children from elementary school. So it's not as big of a challenge. I think in Colorado, us not having that, I've seen
Hmm.
a lot of talented guys that should have gone to Division I schools, that
Hmm.
had all the talent in the world, and it just wasn't enough because there was something missing.
Well, that kind of brings up one of the like other big concerns I have is that it feels like when we were kids, everybody played,
Hmm.
and now if you play, you've got to play like your intention is to be in the divisions. I've got a friend, his kid's great, he's athletic, he's like 6 or 7, and he's playing soccer almost year round. And that's not how it used to be, right? You used to play like you played baseball in this season, you played football in this season, maybe you had some downtime to go do whatever else you were going to do. And like we had talked about before around how I remember seeing an article somewhere that I can't find anymore about how we're seeing more and more young athletes get repetitive stress injuries earlier and earlier because of how hard they're hitting a singular sport early. But it also seems like that's kind of what you have to do now if you want to make it to whatever, because that's what the people that are getting there are doing. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the message that folks are trying to send out. I also think that, sports, even back in the day, but even more so now, are so lucrative. Like you have these coaches that's all they do is coach. And especially within the soccer world, you have like high profile coaches that coach youth sports that move in from other countries and all they're doing is coaching.
Hmm.
So it makes sense that they're going to tell their star player, I want you to play summer, fall, indoor in the winter, in spring, and then get ready for summer. We're going year round. And if you don't play all of these, there's a possibility that you're not going to keep up. To me, it's a business, and it's becoming more of a business at the youth level. And I think for some people, playing one sport might make sense, but for most, it would be important to play a variety of sports because you are seeing the toll that it's taken on our kids' bodies by just focusing on one sport. You're always doing the same fundamentals. Like it's taxing.
The way that the frame that's always made the most sense to me that I try to guide dads towards is no matter who your kid is, they've got to go and play a few seasons of a team sport and they've got to go play a few seasons of an individual sport.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter whether they suck at either of them. They need to know what it feels like to hold the pressure of like, this is on you. You're alone. You're competing against everybody. This is what being on a team feels like, where everybody's pushing towards the same thing and they're winning and losing together. Like, it makes me a little sad when I hear like the soccer stories. Is usually what I'm hearing now. More and more families are pulling away from football, like tackle football, which I think is great. I'm sure I'm going to piss a few people off when I say I don't think children should be playing tackle football. I certainly probably got some head injuries playing. I wonder how smart I would have been. But that seems like if they're a really talented kid, one of those coaches you're talking about is going to like grab that kid and try to push that kid towards like this almost professional level of sport as a child.
I want to go back to one of the things you mentioned really quick. You were talking about families moving away from football and into soccer. And there's studies and reports out there that indicate that there are more head injuries in soccer than there are in football. And
Yeah, I
that's
heard that for
that's
the female athletes in particular. Like female
mm.
soccer has, like, isn't it the highest occurrence of TBI
I'm not for
or
for
close to?
certain, but I know that it's up there. It's pretty high.
Yeah, gotta watch those headers.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and it's a competitive sport too,
Hmm.
where there's a lot of contact, and people don't have that understanding until they go to a game, and they're like, "Whoa, okay, well, let's see what this is about."
Yeah, I always recommend rugby
Mm,
because rugby's contact and like all the injuries in the military that I saw for sports was flag football. And it's
okay,
because when you play flag football, somebody gets hit, but they weren't ready to get hit.
yeah,
Whereas rugby, you're taught how to slow people down and stop them. It's not the like direct straight line 90-degree impacts that football
hmm
has.
hmm
Because there are those kinetic kids. Like I liked playing football as a kid. And if I knew what rugby was back then, rugby would have been just as happy for me. But just getting away from that, like I was taught as a kid, use your head and not like your smarts, but like stick it in their stomach. And
yep,
this was at 10. Like that's nothing good's happening there.
for sure. Yeah, you're taking me back on this one because all of the hits and the concussions and the
Mm,
shake it off and get back in there, and that was there for me as well. And I just think about what was the impact. You think about all the different studies that are coming out about CTE and how that's impacted not just one generation but multiple generations.
mhm,
I think about my father, who integrated schools in the '60s, and he was that elite athlete going to Kansas State University, and just the experiences that I had with him growing up, and what he went through, and you shook it off.
mhm,
And when we think about like those head injuries and going untreated and not getting the support, how that CTE, it impacts that mental health, the anxiety, the depression, the headaches, other physical ailments. I think the right balance is it's important for us not to generalize, and it goes back to really like know your kid,
mhm,
know when you can and can't push their limits. Some kids aren't going to be athletes, and that's perfectly fine. But what else is there for them?
mhm,
And for those guys who are athletes, what else is there outside of that athletic participation
mhm.
that makes them whole? And if they are athletes and they're like, I'm a soccer player, or I'm a football player, or I'm a baseball player, maybe you need to push them to try something else. And
Mhm.
if it doesn't work, fine, but at least they tried it. At least
Mhm.
that experience was there. But again,
Mhm.
it all goes back to know your kid. Give
Mhm.
them that space to talk to you. Still set those, you can still set parameters. You
Mhm.
can still say, be firm and say, I know you love football, but you're going to pick one more thing. Here are two options. Or if you want to choose it, you can choose it. But if not, I'm going to give you two options, and you got to choose between those two, and we're gonna have at it. We're gonna figure out, does this fit you? And if it doesn't, that's okay,
So it kind of comes to scaling choices for kids, right? Like the
for sure.
where I remember for a while there was this minimalist kids movement where you were supposed to get rid of all your kids' toys but three, and then that changed around to where now it's you have kids pick a few toys for the day and then you like lock up the rest of them just because the exhaustion of too much choice.
Mhm.
And it sounds like the same kind of thing can be said for sports where you've got to push your kid towards some discomfort while leaving them room for feeling like they made a pick, they had some efficacy. And I guess the other thing is a lot of the parents I talk to, we put all this on the parents. They can't do everything with it. So what is the integration of like coaches and like how does a parent from the outside or a coach from the outside even look into a system and say whether that's a healthy system for a kid or not? What are the things that you would look for?
I think that it's important, again, starting with that foundation of knowing your kid. What kind
Mm-hmm.
of kid do you have? Do you have a kid that you're just trying to get them active? Do you have a kid who's very competitive and they want to be challenged? And so if you have a kid and you're just trying to get them active, recreational might be the right approach. If you have a kid and they need that challenge, then you might want to go that competitive route. Then the other things I think you have to factor in is culture. What does that culture look like? Do you want them to be around a diverse culture or a different culture? Because, within sports, it looks different.
Mm-hmm.
You go play football, you're going to have a little bit more diversity versus going and playing lacrosse and soccer, although it is growing.
Mm-hmm.
And so understanding that cultural piece, because sometimes kids need to have not just coaches, but teammates that they can relate to and that they have
Mm-hmm.
similar experiences to. And
Well,
that
and
helps ease that transition into that sport.
well, and that diversity is so missed out here in Colorado. Like
It
I grew up
is.
in Maryland, and there was everybody around, and that fundamentally impacted how I moved through the world. And so out here, I just see a lot of guys who, they're not like racist by any stretch, but they never had an opportunity to be around someone, right? They
Hmm.
never played a sport with somebody. They never did an activity with somebody. And so, yeah, I think sport, and that's where I made most of my like multi-ethnic relationships was through sports, because the social cliques were the social cliques. And those were usually like, you bond up with people like you. I don't think
Hmm.
that's racism. I think that's just human nature on a certain level.
Hmm.
But all of a sudden, when you take a hit for somebody, we're okay.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. That makes me think of, I don't know if you ever watched the show Friday Night Lights.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's
In
a great
that fifth
show.
season with Vince and forget the other guy's name, but they
Mm-hmm.
just kept clashing and butting heads and until he told him, "You're my teammate," took a couple hits for him, and it was like we're good now. So yeah, that cultural piece is so important.
Mm-hmm.
You got to have that, and sometimes it's trial and error, but
Mm-hmm.
also it's quite frankly, even as a professional athlete, let's say we have that elite athlete who's on that trajectory to be that professional athlete, you are rolling the dice. You're rolling the dice that you go to a good college where players getting drafted into the NFL, MLB, or whatever professional ranks. You've got to be you're rolling the dice on the coach staying there and not being fired or not moving on to a better job. You're rolling the dice on your position coach staying there, your
Mm-hmm.
position coach liking you. You're rolling the dice on not getting injured because we have yet to really talk about how the impact of injury on athletes and how that
Yeah.
impacts their ability to get to class. Because
Mm-hmm.
when you're a college athlete, you are on a strict schedule especially during your season. You're up early in the morning. You're going to watch film. Then you got to make it to breakfast. You only got 15 minutes, but it's going to take you 10 minutes to get through the line and another 10 minutes to walk to class.
Mm-hmm.
Then after all your classes are over, then you got to head to practice where you're watching film, then you're out on the field, and then you got to go to dinner before dinner closes at 6:30 and it's already 6:15. If you throw in an
Mm-hmm.
injury, like it's
It's
pretty much shot.
we see that a lot within the military community, and I think it's very similar in that your life is managed for you so you can do the mission, right? And you see that at a lot of like collegiate level athletes and beyond, where the reason why the team's times is structured so much is it's to make sure you got guardrails and you stay on them. And then the minute that there's an injury and you can't be with everybody else, you can't make those things. You're not doing the same things as much as you were, and you're slowing down. The isolation of that is brutal. It's absolutely brutal. The amount of guys I see coming out of the military with injuries and just how isolating that gets and how quickly it goes is rough.
Yeah, for sure. You're speaking my story. My junior
Mm,
year, that was my experience, and started out off as something minor, and it grew to something where it took me out for a couple of games. And
mm-hmm,
so just, going through that, like there's the mental side of it. And you talked about isolation. So there's the mental side of it where, you're doing all this rehab. You
mm-hmm,
still got to go out to practice. And then you still got to go in the locker room, get changed, and try to go to the cafeteria. But the ability to do that is not on the same level as your teammates. You're a
mm-hmm.
couple steps behind them. And so there's that I'm not the same person that I was before this injury. And there's the how do I get back to what I was? Because I need to be able to get on the field. I have a scholarship to protect. Because again, and I'm pretty sure it's like this with the military as
Mm-hmm.
well, that's your identity. Who am I without this?
Well, and without my team, without my sport, without the credibility of that, it gets hard. And so when you went into that and you survived that, and now you're working with student athletes, and I'm sure you've worked with some that have come back from injuries. What do you tell them that you wish you'd have known when you were going through that?
I use this for not just athletes, but all clients that I work with.
Mm-hmm.
Grounding. It's important to be in the moment. You know, and you mentioned it earlier. You talk about that anxiety. Well, anxiety comes from thinking about the past or thinking about the future and not being able to focus on the right here and right now. It's my verbiage is it's a season. This is the season, and that season will come to an end. Now, what do you do while you're in this season? What does that process look like? What does rehab look like? Are you make how do you make sure you're getting the most out of your rehab? You can mope and you can complain and you can be sad about where you're at, and it could impact your ability to rehab in the way that you need to. So, what are you doing to take advantage of this to come back stronger? And I think it's important. I ask the question, but I always communicate. This is a question that you don't have to answer right now. But in the next couple of sessions, my job is to help you figure out and put the pieces together for this plan, this short-term plan. Because again, it's a season.
Yeah.
It's not the rest of your life. It's the season, and we got to get through this season to move on to the next one.
So some of it is bringing them back to the moment and where they're at, and
Sure.
helping them have a plan for where they want to be. And maybe, depending on the severity of things, having a plan for how to let go of whatever it is, depending.
And I see it from a school social worker lens. I
Mm-hmm.
see it from a clinical lens, and I see it from a parent lens.
Mm.
I wholeheartedly see it from a parent lens. The example I can think of is, my son, very active, and I see him. He's about to fall. I know he's getting ready. He's going to fall hard. And at age 11 months, 12 months,
Mm-hmm.
17 months, 2 years old, 2.5. I'm catching them every single time. I'm catching
Practicing
them.
those
Nope.
hands.
Yep, I got you, man. I got you. I got you. I'm going to hold you up no matter what. And just from all of the different professional experiences that I've had, there are times, number one, because I'm old. No,
Mm-hmm.
number two, because like he needs to learn.
Yeah.
Like you got to fall down, and
Yeah.
I can't pick him up. And it's a come on, man, get up. You got this. You got to stand up. You got to get up. Dust
Mm-hmm.
yourself off. Tell yourself you got this. Take a deep breath. Do you need a hug? All right, I got your hug. Now keep
Mm-hmm.
going.
Yeah.
Whereas I do have clients, I do have students who, with parents who you see that over nurturing, something happens, they're right there. And it's
Yeah.
like,
There's parents that are calling the person they interviewed with for a job at 16.
yeah, yeah.
We used to get
Hmm.
those calls when I was working with a veterans transition, because so many vets would give their kids their benefits
Hmm.
to start college. And
Hmm.
then you'd have parents like trying to call professors. I was like, this isn't
Hmm.
elementary school. That's not how this is going to work. Supposed
Right,
to be a grown adult right there.
right.
So it sounds like some of it is also just giving places where kids can fail that it's safe enough for them to fall. You're not protecting, you're not always catching them, you're not always surrounding them with pillows, but you're going to react differently to a 1 year old barreling through a room than you are a 4 year old barreling through a room.
And there's definitely phases there, and there's definitely the where you gotta release a little bit more rope.
Mhm.
You gotta let them fail so that they learn.
And
You
it's
you
terrifying.
you can, it's terrifying, but in all actuality, you're gonna learn more from they're gonna learn more from failing than they are winning every time.
Well, it's like we were talking about before we got on about the different projects we're working on, where sometimes you just got to put something out and try something, even though you know it isn't as good as it can be, because that's how you learn to get better.
That's real. That's
Yeah.
real. I like how you did that too.
Hey,
I love it. Definitely an educational moment for myself. So
hey, man, I'm right there with you trying to do this. So I guess the kind of final question is, you're working with young boys consistently. You've got an immediacy and like intimate view of so many young boys and young men's lives. What do you wish every young man knew about masculinity and success before graduating high school?
the idea that as men, and this is going to sound very masculine, and I'm all right with it. As men, I feel that we are protectors. For me, as a young child, like I heard, the man's supposed to be the protector. At that point in time, protector to me meant that if somebody messes with my family, I'm going to assert my physical aggression.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no, that's part of it. You're a protector to, there's a physical presence of protecting. Like, so that's
Mm-hmm.
important. But there's also the mental and psychological presence of being a
Mm-hmm.
protector as a man. And so by mental, I mean being fully aware and attentive to, those internal and external thoughts, feelings, well-being of not just yourself, but those people that you surround yourself by. Like they need to know that mental presence is there. Psychological for me is the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
that fully engaged and connected to those people that are important in your life.
I always argue that the physical protection piece becomes less and less what you need to do in a successful life.
Hmm.
Like, it's important to know you can, right? I'm a
Hmm.
big believer. Everybody needs to get punched in the face, lose a fight, and win a fight. That's an important lesson for everybody to learn. I don't even think that's gendered. But the older you get, the more people are looking to you for protection from the world, which
Yeah.
costs, in America, that costs money.
Hmm.
And success is contagious. If you are around unsuccessful people, you are more likely to be unsuccessful. If you are around successful people, you are more likely to be successful. And I think that's hard for guys coming out of high school, coming out of college, coming out of the military. Is you've got the guys you're close with, and I'm not saying give up those guys. I'm not saying abandon your friends. But if you've got something that you want to be doing, and they're disruptive to that, you got to check them, and you got to go get around people that are going to help you with that, help you be a better man, help you be a better provider, help you be a better protector. Whatever the roles of those that you're choosing for yourself are, you got to go be around people that are going to empower that.
When I think about success, definitely it is surrounding yourself with those individuals who have that same grind
Mm-hmm.
to want to be successful. And that does come with some sacrifices and tightening up your circle. That's important. And sometimes, and I've had kids that I've worked with, there's that guilt of, well, if I'm not friends with them, then am I a bad person? Just because I want to better myself, like, does this make me a bad person for not wanting to be friends with them? And it's like, no, not necessarily. And like, sometimes you got to make a sacrifice to get out of life what you're trying to make it, and that's
Yeah.
okay. It doesn't
And
mean that you love somebody any less or that they're not your people.
for me, between all the moves between the military and college, I moved about a dozen times in 10 years. And the only thing that has given me peace on all the relationships I've had to pick up and put down is that they're in seasons. That was the time for that
Mm.
friendship. That time is over, and hopefully they'll come back around and we'll be able to reconnect at some point. But yeah, it's hard. And like we were talking about earlier before we got on, when we were talking about creating things and doing things, you need to be around both, right? You need to be around people that are pushing you for your grind, but then you got to be around people that just like you, that just like your jokes, like what you bring to a room, and you got to have that balance. But it's hard to find.
For sure, especially in this day and age where it's just life is different. You think about the cost of living. Salary is pretty much staying the same, and trying to diversify how you make your money as a clinician.
Yeah.
That's a hard thing
Well,
to do.
I think that's just it, right? If you're not rich, everybody needs a side hustle, which is very telling.
Hmm.
I really love a lot of the perspective you bring. I think it's really wonderful the way that you talk about parenting as you've got to know your kid and you've got to pay attention to the environment and you've got to help both navigate each other. the idea of a parent being a bridge between the kid and the world is a pretty solid one. So thanks for sharing that, man. I hadn't thought about it that way before.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I love to share my perspective and just sit down and talk with people who have different experiences and to hear about the differences as well as the similarities because we work with a completely different clientele, yet some of the things that our clients and we as clinicians experience
Mm.
are still very in alignment.
Yeah, some of it's just the shared experience of your gender, of your country,
Hmm.
of your culture. By seeing it in so many places, it makes it easier to accept it, but it also, you get to see people doing it different ways. And you get to see these things expressed, so it gives you more choice. I'm a big proponent of get yourself out there, get yourself around as many different kinds of people as you can, because it's the only way to really know yourself. Because if you're never around anybody different, if you're never around anything different going on, you don't even know what questions to ask yourself, much less find answers. It's my favorite part about this job, man. That's what I love. I get to go and like hear the deepest parts of people's lives, and I've learned so much about myself by having to take on some of those questions.
I can totally relate. I mean, for me, just getting into the field of social work and
Mm-hmm.
doing that reflection of yourself and being like, whoa, okay, so this is where I'm at. I don't think without it, I'm the same person that I am now. When you do that deep dive of yourself and you unlock doors that you didn't even know existed, you look up and you're like, whoa, and I've walked through that door.
Mm-hmm.
Here's this possibility. Here's this option. Let me figure out and see what this looks like.
Yeah, Kevin Hart started his podcast and he talks a lot about the door behind the door.
Hmm.
Like you see where successful people go in and you get through that door, but there's another door in that room that you can't see until somebody shows you the door. And there's always another one. Like every door you go through, every door you open, every part of yourself you explore, there's always another door in there somewhere. You just don't, if you don't know where to look, don't worry. Be around some different people, have some different experiences. You'll find it. There's
For
always
sure.
more to learn.
For sure. And this is where you get it right here doing this
Mm-hmm.
work. And I think going back to the athletics piece, it was easy to find it there compared to now. Being on a football field, being on a
Mm-hmm.
baseball field, it was easy,
There's a
you know.
straight line goal. This is where we're going. Well, I suppose we should get into the closing questions because
All
I've already
right,
taken up
sounds
about
good.
an hour of your time and we need to make sure we get you back to your boy. What is a truth about masculinity you learned before you were 12 that remains true today?
I think it just goes back to that being the protector. And, although I didn't have the complete understanding of what it meant to be a protector, I thought it was just the physical piece of it. I've grown to know that it is the other aspects of being present, that
Mm-hmm.
mental and that psychological piece of just being present and nurturing. That is being that protector.
Yeah, a number of guys have come on now and talked about that. And the way you're describing it makes me think more about like my father. He wasn't a violent guy, he was a stoner, but we were around a bunch of bikers. There were always violent guys around. And it was never that my father was a victim or anything. He just wasn't a physically aggressive guy, but he was always like if he was in the room, he could make you feel safe as a kid, right? You were safe to go try the thing. You were safe to go whatever, you could run up to him and he wasn't the softest dude, man. He was an 80s dad, but there was that protection just by having him around. That
Hmm.
emotional safety, that security of like that's the rock of the moment. And I think there's a beauty of broadening out what we think of when we think of protection to that, because there's so many guys that they don't have the capacity for violence, right? That's not the kind of protection they're going to bring to the world, and not everybody has to. But you got to bring something. What's your lane? What are you bringing in? How are you making people feel like whole and secure?
I, I,
Yeah.
I can relate to a lot of that with my own upbringing and having my
Mm-hmm.
dad in the household and then that presence. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it sticks out for me even more so because when he passed away when I was 16, it
Yeah.
was just gone. And
Mm-hmm.
it's that isolated feeling. And it's like, oh man, like I'm stepping into this role and I don't even know what role I'm stepping into.
Yeah. All of a
But
sudden,
it's
there's no
it's
roof.
that's yeah, and security. That
Yeah.
roof is that security, and it's
Yeah.
gone.
It's a hard thing to lose. I'm really sorry that happened to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's definitely something where I've found a way to turn it into my passion.
Mm-hmm.
In working with youth. who have experienced loss, and not just
Mm-hmm.
loss of a parent through death. I mean, there's a variety of forms of loss, whether it's incarceration, whether it's separation, and so you're not living with both parents anymore, as well as a variety of other things. And so the experience of loss is something that always stays with you. It's some days are better than others. You grow to learn how to navigate it and manage it as best as you can. And I'm fortunate enough to have found my passion
Mm-hmm.
in working with youth within my own experience of loss.
I think we've both been lucky enough to figure out a way to make money with our passion, which is incredibly rare as a gift. So many people don't get that. So the next one is tell us about a time where pursuing masculinity has hurt you.
I think that would also relate to, me losing my father and
Mm,
not having that consistent male role model in my life, and then trying to figure it out. That consistency was what I saw that I was passionate about, sports. So I'm looking at professional athletes. I'm looking at the entertainment world as the foundation of what it looks like for me to be a man. I'm
mm,
holding on to some of the things that I learned and experienced from my dad being there, and saying, putting all of that together and saying, well,
mm,
this is what I need to do to be a man. This is how a man handles situations. You lead with that hardened mentality. You
mm,
put those feelings aside, because feelings get in the way of you being the man. And
yeah.
so, yeah, that definitely was a process that I think a lot of men can relate to, whether their fathers were in their lives or are in their lives still, and
Mm.
they, have their own kids, or they have their own nieces and nephews that they're trying to instill that fatherly figure knowledge and teachings to.
Yeah, I think that's the struggle with when boys lose close men is the way that men are in the world is generally not complete. Those athletes, the movie stars, the people we look to, that's the persona they're bringing to the world to survive and do well in that world. But you don't get to be with him around the dinner table while he's laughing. You don't get to be around him
Hmm.
when he's messing up and watch
Hmm.
him make a recovery. You don't get to be around any of that. So whenever that happens, the amount of shame that a lot of guys get because they make those mistakes, but no one's shown them how to recover. No one's showed them that to live is to make a mistake. And so for you, it sounds like that stoic kind of aggression and persona was key for you early to survive without your father, and it took
Oh,
you a long time to kind of wash that.
it was my armor.
Mm-hmm.
It was my armor that protected me from all the bad, but also all the good.
Yeah,
Um,
wall
you
wall
know,
keeps everything out.
for
It needs a
for sure.
door. Need a door.
Yes, yes, we got to have a couple of doors and a couple of keys, and things will be all right.
Yeah. On the other side of that coin, right? We like to go out on a positive end.
Okay.
Tell us about a time when pursuing masculinity helped you, empowered you.
For me, a lot of my experiences, whether good or bad, are intertwined. I've found that in making those mistakes, in pursuing masculinity, those mistakes that hurt me, I've learned from them. I feel that I've grown to understand what parts of that masculinity, the positive aspects of that masculinity, I need to take with me, as well as I really am grateful for becoming a social worker
Yeah.
because I challenge myself. I challenge some of the things that I was brought up with in my
Mm-hmm.
life that exude toxic masculinity. Still make mistakes because I'm human, but I definitely take some of those negative experiences, and I've flipped a lot of them. I'm still a work in progress to help me understand how I need to navigate through life. I think also with becoming a school social worker, having a son
Mm-hmm.
has made me have to work on being better. For instance, so son was about 2 years old, and we're like, well, we need some more stuff in him for we need some more stuff for him in the basement for him to engage in. He had a little slide, he had some toys, but he needed a little something more. And my wife said, well, why don't we get him a kitchen set? And automatically I was like, no, we don't need a kitchen set. Like he doesn't need that. We'll get him a tool set so he can play with some tools and he can learn how to hammer the nails in, screw the screws in. We're not getting the kitchen set. And she just kind of looked at me, and it was a couple of days that went by, and I sat there processing and thinking to myself, like, I can do a little bit with a hammer. I can do a little bit with some screws and a drill, but I can get in the kitchen and make some pancakes and eggs, and I can do a mean meatloaf. I can do some tacos, burritos. Like I have a variety of things that I can cook. And so why am I in this toxic place with my son in a kitchen set? Like why am I there? And so this played out in my head for multiple days. And so I went back to my wife and I said, I'm sorry. Like I overreacted. I wasn't thinking clearly about it. Let's get him a kitchen set. And so we got him the kitchen set, and he's cooking up all kinds of stuff. I'm getting pie hamburgers and French fries and peas, and we're having a good time now.
And now I'm hungry.
Right.
Yeah, for me, whenever that voice pops out, I always think of it like, oh, that was my dad's voice, or oh, that's my grandfather's voice. And what's given me some peace with that voice is when that voice hit me, it was what was needed at that time. Like if you went to school when we went to school, as a boy who was playing with dolls, as a boy who was playing in a kitchen, you were going to get physically hurt. Like that was no joke when we were kids, at least not where I was at. Now we're doing better about giving boys room, girls room to do whatever it is. There's an expectation that people can make choices. And Dave Ramsey's a person who cooks amazingly, and all the biggest chefs in the world are men.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But that gives me some peace with it because it lets me both forgive myself for the voice being there and kind of taking over for a moment. But it also lets me give those old men that were doing their best for me some grace. That, that wasn't toxic. That was what it was at the time. And it's not that time anymore.
And that's okay.
Sense.
That makes sense.
Because all those corrections come from love that came from them being a protector, right?
For sure. Never thought about it like that. That totally makes sense.
Works for me, man. Everybody's got to come up with their own frame, right?
For sure.
Figure out how that voice plays in your head. There's plenty of guys where their dad's voices are just awful.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Parent was abusive, parent was whatever. Not everybody can do that. It's important to figure out where those parts of you come from.
For sure.
Oh, man, thanks so much for this.
Definitely,
man.
I enjoyed
a lot of fun,
this.
Man.
Yeah.
I appreciate your expertise, and I'm sure that at some point this documentary of yours is going to be out, and we're going to have you on to talk about it. And it sounds like maybe the end of the summer. We putting some pressure on that a little bit.
That would be some extreme. Oh man, that would be a dream come true.
You just felt that in your chest, didn't you? You're like, oh, Tim, not this summer. It's not going to be done by this summer. All right.
Yeah, I wish that were the case. I know that, but what I can say is though, I am definitely re-energized because there is an extreme level of passion in doing this project. It can be draining, and so my approach, back in 2011 was I'm going to knock this out and I'm going to work on this until it's finished. And it's like, no, this is going to come in seasons too. Mm-hmm. And this is the season to take that next step. What that next step is, that remains to be seen. But the next step is happening, and I definitely will let you know when that next step happens, as well as when it's completed.
All right, man. Keep me in the loop. I'm looking forward to it.
For sure. Will do.
Take care.
All right. You too.
And that's our conversation with Jamal Jackson. Thanks so much for tuning in. Let's go ahead and clear up a few things. So for the most part, we did really good this episode on the fact check. We had 5 things that are worth clarifying that we had correct and are worth bringing some nuance to. Student athletes generally don't go pro. Only about 2% of any student athletes move on to some kind of professional play. So the vast majority of us who played sport had that moment where we knew it wasn't going to be our life anymore. That's why these transition conversations are so important. Post-athlete identity transition is hard. There's good data behind the depression and the struggles that happen with that when people lose that part of their identity. And it's worth building out specific ways to help support that. The next one is specialization and burnout rates. So by having kids specialize so early, we are seeing an increase in injuries, and we are seeing earlier burnout in student athletes. So that is absolutely a factor, and there's good data to back it up. We talked a little bit about head injuries. Football still leads in concussions and still a problem, but almost all other sports have some risk, and soccer in particular for female athletes also tends to have some pretty consistent head trauma. The last one is the biggest piece of burnout for most student athletes is going to be parental pressure. I say that here because if you're a parent listening, please remember that these athletes that you're coaching, that you're guiding, they may not have your dream. Don't put your dream into your child in athletics. If you do, you're very likely to push them out of the sport that you want them to love so much. So keep that in mind as you go forward and take that lesson out into the world for us, please. The three things that we got a little bit, I wouldn't say wrong, but need some clarification. Jamal said that Colorado isn't a sports state. He meant for the pipeline. We don't have a lot of student athletes go on to college or go on to pro play like, let's say, Texas does or Alabama does. But Colorado is an incredibly active state. And we love our sport here. We have a riot every time one of our teams win, and we win a lot. We do pretty well out here. So student athletics is a big deal. Most kids play sports. It just doesn't lead to that pipeline. We talked about CTEs and the multi-generational impact it may or may not have. We don't have good data on CTEs from earlier generations. Unsurprisingly, we don't have brain scans of our grandfathers. We don't know what the impacts of those were from an academic standpoint. I will say, most of the older guys I work with that played sport have concerns about their cognitive function afterwards. That's just my anecdotal experience, though, so it's worth mentioning that we don't have good academic data to back that up. And the last one is Jamal mentioned that IEPs often make student athletics more difficult. We couldn't find good data on that, but Jamal's anecdotal experience with that is worth paying attention to. He's a dedicated professional who's really attentive to his students' needs, and that may be something to watch for. Just because we don't have broad data on it doesn't mean his experience isn't valid and isn't useful to you. But we try to be as clear here as we can. So it was important to tell you. That's it. That's the facts for this one. At the beginning of the episode, I asked you to think about the lessons that you wish you'd learned from your student athletics and what somebody might have told you. Now that you've listened to Jamal's conversation and expertise, what do you wish you'd known? Has it changed? And who might you share this with to help them in their transition? Please take a moment, message me, share it in the comments. I think the more that we have these conversations and start these conversations publicly, the more young men and boys will have guidance and the mentorship that they so desperately need. I think a lot of guys just don't know what to say in these moments. So maybe by sharing what you're going to say, you'll help another guy figure out how to help somebody else. Thanks so much for taking the time to watch. My name's Tim Winnicky. This is American Masculinity, and we'll see you next week when we talk about building and maintaining grit. Talk to you then.